right, so with that, I never got to the point in my art where I felt like I found my own voice. And I know I've got some uniqueness in me. I know I can let go of representational stuff somewhat, but my agenda, I suppose, if I were to say artistically these days, is I still like and enjoy and want to pursue illusions of light, form, and space. But I want a painterly twist somehow, and I'd like to find my own voice while still being, I guess more like the Impressionists, right? It felt like light, form, space, depth, volume, but had its own painterly, leave it to interpretation state. And I still find that the most wonderful representational art. So that's what I'm chasing now. And I hope I get to paint enough to where I might say, no, that seems like it's me, and I like it enough, and it still features aspects of the world while leaving things to the imagination. I think artistically, that's my ambition. So with that though, I was hoping again to maybe teach a little something of value. So what I'd like to do is just paint and talk. I certainly won't finish this. But what I'm hoping happens tonight is I'll talk about an awful lot of things related to color, painting color with understanding, with the hopes that with your various backgrounds, you might go, oh, that's something I hadn't thought of, or that's something I could think to implement or chase, or take a class on. And not being delusional that I'm going about this in a way where it's going to be like, oh yeah, you'd be able to assimilate it and use it. It's just hopefully in hearing a lot of things you might go, it's something I hadn't really embraced or hadn't keyed on before. And color theory, I think, is fascinating. In fact, I think it's what caused Charlotte to think to invite me to do this. I was subbing for a class at the community college, and I was talking about some of these things, and Charlotte said something to the effect of, oh, I'm finding this kind of interesting. Would you be willing to share this with another audience? I said, sure. So with that, I'll paint, I'll talk, fire away. Tell me when I'm supposed to be done, what time?
Around 8:30.
8:30, so stop me. Charlotte, can I call you the timekeeper? Just tell me when you want me to be done before 8:30.
If I feel like it.
Yeah.
If I like it a lot.
Like SpongeBob, 4 hours a day to... I was having so much fun. I didn't notice people weren't still here. I had a color theorist teacher at the Art Center named Judith Crook, and she taught for all kinds of studios and creative houses down in Los Angeles. And it was a real privilege to work with her. She was an eccentric, fun, animated, crazy lady, with all due respect. But boy, she knew color. Color was her life, and these, Disney would have her come and talk color to their artists, and again, different places. And so when I was working with her, I really worked hard at picking her brain, and I was fortunate enough to get what she called her color notes. It was more of a little booklet of color theory that she had compiled over the years. And I had her for one, and I think about a half of a class, and then she died of an aggressive cancer, right in the middle of the trimester, which was sad, but I felt like I at least got a taste of her genius. So I tried to, learn from her. Much of what I guess I would talk about here, she made apparent to and for me. Let's see.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
You toned your panel, and then is that charcoal or just paint wash?
Just paint. The drawing and some of this lay-in is just oil paint with liquid. And I wanted this to be a little exaggerated and funky because I thought it'd be fun to paint into. But it's probably a little wilder and it probably, speaking of color theory, would be a little hard to paint into without simultaneous contrast problems, if you know about simultaneous contrast much. But it was another painting I started, and I had some fun texture, and I thought, oh, this just be fun to paint on top of, let's see what happens for this demo. But I didn't want to take the time to draw a little bit today. This is just out of my head, so I'll just see what in fact, I'm testing myself, so it's me talking about what I think I know, but I'm sure I'll hit areas where I go, yeah, I need to look into that to know what to do about it. And that's part of what's fun about this, is hearing what I do and don't understand about things. I hope not at people's expense. So with that, my wife's favorite subject, hue, value, and intensity. How many of you are comfortable with those, what that means? Getting nods? Somebody tell the crowd, how would you define the hue property of color? Color is made up of those three visible, Judith Crook called them phenomena. The hue aspect of color is what? Okay, I can see I'm not.
It's the color you see.
Well, color is made up of three properties altogether. Full color features the properties of hue, value, and intensity, and they're broken out pretty well on a computer program, right? If you use a color picker, you'll see that. They substitute the word, or often the computer programs substitute the word intensity for what? Saturation. Yeah, saturation. So hue, value, intensity, hue, value, saturation. It's kind of interchangeable. But the hue aspect of a color is the spectral family that a name has been given to. And there are only 6 families, and there are relatives within the family, but the rainbow features how many hues? 6. And what are they? We know, yeah, we know, we were taught in kindergarten, yep, those 6.
Yellow, blue, orange, violet, and green.
There you go. Only 6. And then they have, or another way to talk about those is there's the hue center of that family, which, I'll attempt to say it this way, is if we say there's a true orange, right, orange then leans to what as it starts to transition into the next family? Orange on one side goes red, orange on the other side goes yellow. Hue center is orange, no yellow, no red. So when somebody identifies it as specifically mixing the hue aspect of paint, they're identifying the family. And if it's, whether or not it's hue center, and if it's not hue center, it's going one side or the other. And that judgment everybody has to make all the time if you're trying to match color. And so, oh, it's a yellow-green. Okay, well, you just said, well, Brian, there's only, now that's that combination, but is it a yellow-green going yellower or a yellow-green going greener? And the right on the fence doesn't matter so much as long as you eventually capture what you see and what you're after. So every time we mix color, we're making hue judgments. The value property of color is what? The lightness or darkness of it. And that property probably messes up more attempted artists than anybody or any other property for a number of reasons. Value is hard for people to get. For real reasons. It's an illusory thing one chases for a number of reasons, and if this were a lengthy oil painting class, we could figure it out and talk and demo more sufficiently. But I'll tell you, I could make a living, in a way I probably have, just trying to teach people light dark judgment skills. And again, I know enough about why it's hard to do that I can spend a lot of time explaining why you're not getting your value relationships or why I'm not getting my value relationships. And if a person learns to see value and command it, they're controlling most of what influences form and space illusions. And light, light, form, and space. So we look at a painting and say, wow, that feels like light, form, and space. It's it's gonna have some very good value relationships going on. If we look at a painting and it doesn't have that going on, it's got arbitrary values that are not relating. That's the other part. Well, I guess I'm on my soapbox here. When we're doing an illusory painting of light, form, and space, what we're figuring out are value relationships, and what we're presenting in the painting are color relationships, full color relationships. Don't raise your hand if this blows your mind, but it blows a lot of people's minds, so you're normal if it blows your mind. Blew my mind at first, and now I've made my peace with it, maybe. We show up thinking we're trying to paint what we see. Don't most of us? I mean, when you learn to draw, isn't that what the challenge is? I'm trying to say, if that's that relative to that, and that's that relative to that. Okay, I'm trying to just paint a line, an edge, a position the way I see it, and we start thinking that's making art. And then some of y'all who, like myself, shows up and says, yeah, but when it comes to value, guess what? You're often not recording what you see, and people go, how can that be? And then when you throw them into a painting class and put a cast in front of them and start talking about relationships or what are going to result in illusion, and they're painting what they see, and they're painting accurately what they see, but they're not getting the illusion that's there, that's a little tough on a soul, isn't it? To have somebody come say, guess what, you're right, but you're wrong. Because your relationships aren't working. You're painting what you see. I know, I see the same thing you do, but I have to paint and you have to paint what it relatively needs to be to belong to the overall scene. And that oftentimes is not the visual experience. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people look at me like I lost my mind, like some of you might be now when I start talking like that. It's like, what do you mean? That doesn't make any sense. And it takes quite a bit of mileage and quite a few exercises to start to go, I know what I saw, I know what it needs to be. I know what I need to translate it to be. And full color's even that way. So I've gone off a little bit of a tangent, but value is tricky business for people. And the people that figure out value and start getting the form illusions and the light illusions and the space illusions, they do kind of distinguish themselves from others that just have a hard time finding that. So I'm loose again.
So an artist friend of mine says value does all the work and color gets all the credit.
There you go, I like that. I used to call it kind of like value is the cake, hue and intensity is the icing on the cake. And hue and intensity still play big parts, but again, for light, form, and space, value is the workhorse. You can be pretty arbitrary with hue and intensity and still sell, form and space illusions if the drawing is good too with the paint. Which I'll say brings me to the third property, though there was no segue there. Intensity, how would you describe that if you were teaching art school? The intensity property of color.
Bright or dull,
That's it.
saturated.
Of the hue in question. So I would use, I've used this example a few times in my teaching with my little deer hunting, my hunting experience, that I can go out into the woods with my blaze orange vest, which is, I'll call it a hue center orange. And I can stand on orange dirt. In fact, of that picture Kyler showed, that was orange dirt, pretty, Diamond Fork dirt, kind of that color in a lot of places. And it could be the same valued vest as that dirt, and the exact same hue, but I would be more visible, or I will contrast from that dirt because of intensity. That orange is brighter, more saturated, more intense. And we're making those judgments too, right? When we paint. So what's the family? How light or dark is it? And what level of saturation or intensity is it? And if a person can make those clear in their mind, they can start mixing color once they learn the mechanics of the pigment. But that's what you're doing, and I'm doing all the time, right? It's like hue, value, intensity, in whatever order. I think usually I do kind of start with hue, maybe not. and then you're working your pigment to get there. And I hope I'm not insulting the group, but it's kind of, to me, headier color theory builds upon that in so many respects. So as we talk about color, we say, therefore, if this is a color idea, right, the hue is affected this way, the value is affected this way, the intensity is affected this way, and we can better predict what the color should be. And I'll be so bold as to say, and I like this idea, right? If you know what to expect to see, you're more likely to see it and capture it than if you just look up and experience it at its whatever face value. I mean, isn't that what linear perspective is based on? Right? They teach you to eyeball when you draw. We all go through that. And then we still go, man, why can't I get that right? That still doesn't look like that box, and I'm doing my best to see it. And then you take a linear perspective class, and somebody comes along talking about vanishing points and parallel edges receding into space, converging to a vanishing point. And pretty soon you go, oh, that theory helps me see it. I think to look for it, I capture it. So similar motive here. If I know what to expect to see, I should be able to capture it. And not only that, if I want to play with the truth and augment it, if I know kind of the truth, then my exaggerations of playing it up or playing it down should be more convincing too. Because I'm speaking, a truth, but I'm toying with it a bit. So for all, at least those couple of reasons I want to go. So here we go. You're thinking, yeah, you're going to paint one day, aren't you, Bryan? Aspen tree is going to be the star. The rest of it I'll just try to relate. We'll see how far it goes, but again, hopefully the journey will be what matters. We won't have time to finish much.
What do you use for your mediums?
Liquin. I've got original liquin, and then Gamsol's the solvent. I'm going to quote Judith again. After hue, value, and intensity, 6 categories. Again, not that I expect this to be a great educational opportunity, other than to maybe someone will go, okay, I want to look into that, I want to study that further. I'm hoping that's what happens, myself included. To quote Judith, by assimilating the following variables, the color of any visible thing can be determined. And she said there are 6, categorically. The local color, the tonal color, reflected color, and then she wrote it, in turn conditioned by the color of the light, the intensity of the light, intervening atmospheric effects, which also includes water, any intervening colored thing. So let me see if I can make some sense out of that. Local color of something is what? When we say normally this is this color, we're referring to the local color usually. So the local color of an aspen is the color at which we would see it under a full color, full spectral lighting situation or white light. So the aspen tree, your yard or in the woods generally is what, as we think about it, appreciate it? Yeah, a little gray, oftentimes greenish, slight gray-green, aren't they? Yeah. And some are quite white and others. And it's a bit academic on what I choose to call the local color, but I know I'm dealing with, though, bark that is a gray-green. And some are greener and grayer and whatever than others. But if I appreciate the local color, there's one part of the formula, right, of the 6 areas. And really, probably the average soul that just thinks about color probably is usually thinking about local color, how they've learned it, how they've memorized it through their experiences. So we think most of us kind of think in terms of, well, that horse is a reddish brown, grass is green, right? So gray, green local color. And again, I'm calling my own value. And I'm not going to paint the shadow side because I want to save myself some time and layer headaches. Okay. So otherwise, I could paint the whole tree, and then, but when I get the tonal color, I don't wanna have to mess with it. Local color of fall grass right before deer hunting starts, right, mid-November, be what? What would you call local color there for? Yeah. Yeah, color straw, so local color in a white light situation up in, backside of Timpanogos. So as I think about that, it's a little more intense in the fall than it is right now. Grab some of that. But I'm thinking, okay, local color, I've got some grass here that I'm gonna be dealing with in the white lighting condition. And right now, I'm just the one calling the other properties. You could say just, if I were to pick that grass and stand under a white light, it would look about like that to me, right? That's how I'm thinking about it. But if you're up there, American Fork Canyon, and you see this going on, you're thinking that too. Oh, I've got some gold grass I'm dealing with. And there would be some other shifting, right, of course, too. It's not really exactly the same, even locally. Some that looks more like that, that's lost its life a little earlier, and so on and so forth. And then on this, I'll say that this meadow also still is mostly going to be a meadow of this colored grass, we'll say, for the most part. So making our local color declaration there. Pine trees, all kinds of different variations of color, of course, but generally speaking, a pine tree, blue-green, greenish, yeah, right, so local color-wise. And how well do you even, mental image wise, think about it, that seems too intense to me. Right, and we know they change colors too with the seasons, and they're darker and grayer and cooler usually in the winter time. But I'm gonna say that I know I'm gonna be dealing with some pine trees that local color wise, maybe something like this. Initially. Okay, I'm actually gonna have, if time permits, I hope I can get this far enough that there's enough of an illusion that it gets kind of fun, but we'll see, I suppose. I'm going to paint some pine tree colors behind them probably, and maybe as well, but not right now, I'm going to save some time and mileage and paint layering problems and challenges. So side hill, running down, meadow, maybe some pine trees. About that color locally. And then I've got, let's do some rocks on the mountains. Background, we may even claim there was a bit of a glacier and some snow left, or an early snow that stayed up. Local color, what are we saying about our rocks? Yeah, just gray, brown. It's our call in this case. I think I want mine slightly warmish. It's starting to be a little orangish and got some mosaics here. So white sunlight, I'm gonna be a little even non-committal. Is this brown, is it green? Let's see what happens if I, well, that, we'll say some of this higher stuff above timberline. Gonna feature that somewhat. Also just kind of painting the light side right now to save myself some process fun. All the way down. And then I want to have some of my mountain skylines kind of compositionally speak like that. I'll tell myself. A little too green. Let's go a little less green. I wanted to be able to play with that some, but that's too much. And I'm cheating a little bit right now anyway too with atmospheric color as it gets cooler, bluer, grayer and all that stuff. But one of the 6 categories, we're dealing with local color when we look at things. We know that. And we try to mix our paint to capture that part of the categorical mix. Tonal color, in a nutshell, says that's what happens in color experience when light and dark, or the value aspect and the value property is brought into literally the mix. Okay. Or what results belonging to the effects of light and shadow. So if I understand the local color of that aspen is a light gray green, then I would say tonal color says then, and I'm going to claim a single major light source, in this case the sun, what happens to that trunk when the light source hits it and the value business starts coming into play. And I start going, okay, the light dark part of this more than anything. So where we got what can start to be the light side of the tree, I'm going to say a third of the tree will be shadow side. How do I want to paint that? And what would it need to be a convincing illusion of light, of the type of quality of light that I'm thinking of or I might be seeing? So gray, green, and shadow looks like what? And if a person can conceive of what that would look like through experience and understanding, they're going to cut to a quicker chase, probably in ways. Way too green, way too heat, way too dark too. But local color and shadow. Working on that relationship, right? Knowing that if I want to really get an illusion of the type and quality of light that is happening or I'm after or I'm trying to augment, one of the biggest keys is right here, right? The big light side to shadow side relationship and the degree of contrast that exists. If I blow this relationship, if I don't get the right degree of relationship, and again, not what I'm seeing necessarily, what it needs to be as I translate this thing into a painting. Great, if I blow this, I blow the relationship that the light source is revealing. And what's the average non-initiated person going to do about the shadow side when they look to pick the shadow side of the tree? They're going to go, what? That's pretty light. I saw it. That's pretty bright. I can see into that shadow, and they will paint this too light or too dark. Why?
And the contrast.
But why do they do it? Why do they get duped?
If your eye adjusts.
That's it, eye dilation. So the eye opens up to let more light in, and the experience is that it's brighter than the relationship is. And And that's where everybody gets initially messed up, as they go, it's this, and then they paint it, and they go, that doesn't feel like the illusion of light, form, and space.
That's why squinting is good.
Because it reduces dilation. Yep, perfect.
What did you say, the illusion of light, something, space?
Form,
Form,
yeah,
space.
3D, value.
I'm just throwing this out, wouldn't the shadow side be cooler?
Yeah, that's another part of literally the mix. So there's warm light, there's shadow, there's all those things too that come into play. Now, we can see if we can touch on those as we get into it a little bit more. What else happens with tonal color on just the aspen? What are some of the light logic things we've been taught that we should expect to see? Surfaces, planes more perpendicular to the light source should be what? Lighter, brighter than those less perpendicular to light rays. So where's my sun? Light side, shadow side. Which parts of the tree are more perpendicular? These, right? That's why I try not to touch it. And then what happens as the perpendicularity turns, as they say, away from the direction of the light source and the lines of the light? Value-wise, it gets darker. Color-wise, what happens? Full color. The local color exhibits itself more strongly, right? It takes over and says, no, I'm gonna outdo you. So let's say our light source, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I hope it'll work. Let's say our light source is, let's just call it white for now. No, I'm gonna get the color real quick. Let's say we've got a gold sun. The surface is more perpendicular to that gold light, will reflect more of that gold light, and will take on more of a gold expression, right? Because we're seeing more of that light reflected, so the light source color takes over. But as the perpendicularity changes away from that, what happens? The local color comes back and says, you're bouncing off me, color of the light. I'm gonna show you more of what I am, local color-wise, by the material I am. And I'm not going to be as influenced by the color of the sun as the area is more, or the surface area is more perpendicular. Until eventually what happens, turns away and we're no longer in light. We're, I think is what you were alluding to, shadow side, and we have secondary light sources, ambient light, reflected light, having it say more so, because the sun, main source, strongest source, is not able to reach. So call it that for now. Gold, deadish, dying grass in shadow, what's it gonna look like with the type and quality of light? Darker, grayer, cooler, to green. Red. So that local color, it's too dark. So as I search to find it, starts to look like that kind of stuff, doesn't it? So my gold grass that's not being hit by the light source because something's casting a shadow for compositional reasons. There's a tree over here or a rock or something that's just happens to fortunately be there. Maybe tell me what time it is, I've lost track on that.
It's 8 o'clock.
Okay. This- I'm trying to practice what I preach. What I'm trying to preach. I'm trying to make this believable. does this feel like that color in shadow?
On the left it does, on the right I'd say it looks green.
It's still, yeah, it's not getting there yet, is it?
It's almost purplish on the left.
I'd probably lean into the cool shadow thing too, preempting it a bit. Better. What about the shadow sides of the pine trees? Yeah, so, okay, there's the local color in shadow. It's gonna be what? So keep it with my slightly cooler. Some kind of three-quarter lighting. Tell myself, I haven't decided if I want these guys in the light or not. For now, we'll say they are. Okay, so trying to get that relationship going, or all of them going.
That did a lot for me.
Helped, give something. You know, and it, these are kind of the pat things you hear, right? But if you can do nothing more than a halftone, good halftone color relationship to good shadow side relationship, you've captured a lot. I mean, that's hard enough for people to do until reflective light and other things come into play. I'm gonna hurry and get the shadow side of the aspen. So I'm gonna have a branch coming off here in shadow, doing its thing. This one too. Depending on where the light can and can't go, what's going on, I'm gonna say some gray green and shadow a bit until I develop it further. Yeah, whatever it is. I just gotta get enough other color in here real quick to make it happen, or so this starts to come together enough. Local color of the sky. Let's make a sky statement here. This- You're talking sunset already? Now what am I gonna do? I'm conflicted. What's the local color of a sky, though? Blue to the what? It's true blue, blue violet,
Towards the violet.
usually, right? I mean,
At this altitude it does.
yeah.
What's your base red color?
My what?
What did you tell me, what did you tell me?
I don't remember. That's an acrylic red violet of some kind.
It was gonna come back when the power went out. What was that, November or something?
Yeah, when the wind started blowing yesterday, I thought, I'm just jinxing this activity.
So you had this prepared then.
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me that much credit. I would have been prepared, or at least this prepared.
Just call it Grand Canyon red.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons I like putting red down is because I shy away from it for some reason, and so if it's there already, it reminds me to keep using it, that sort of thing. I'm not the only one. I mean, it's such a, the words of Arlo Coles, one of my teachers at Griggs, it's such a fickle color. Right, it goes warm, it goes cool, so it's fun with temperature play, and Norman Rockwell called it a warm humanity color. He'd put Mars violet in a lot of his underpaintings, because it had temperature appeal, and there was a lot of that in the skin. You know, skin colors of Caucasian individuals and such. There we go. But I am graying it down also, you can kind of preempt, and I want this to end up with being, with having a warm light, cool shadow to it, with a complementary light side, shadow side. So at least get this sky kind of in here. So I'm saying sky and light, and sky not really with clouds at this point or anything like that, just kind of that gray blue. And it certainly could be developed.
Lighter at the horizon.
Yeah, as it's closer to the sun, it'll be lighter, yeah, a little bit of that shift, which I tried to capture a bit as I moved across with the lightning over here. Like we know, it should also be a little lighter towards the horizon and mountain.
So I'm using straight paint,
I've got a little bit of liquid in here, I think, yeah.
and you use the same brush, you just wipe it down every time?
I am right now, yeah, I wouldn't do that always. In fact, it's a bad idea for a lot of reasons.
Well, it's working today.
Thanks. Let's say gray-green pine trees back in here too, and then I'm really gonna get a,
Wouldn't there be a color shift with the distance?
so let's jump to that. So let's jump, in fact, I'll try to tie all that in, I guess, that probably makes sense. So local color, tonal color, let's hit reflected color. Any object or surface area that receives light, that has a color to it, becomes the source of light itself. Okay? And so we know that this grass, with the way the light's playing off of it, will reflect some of its color into the shadow side of the gray-green aspen. And a wider subject will receive and display more easily reflected or secondary colors. So, something to the effect of, it's gotta be dark enough to still read as shadow, but it's gonna start featuring, taking on the color of its surrounding. And then as we move up in space away from the grass, what happens? Less influence, proximity. By the time we get up here, it's whatever reflected light is going on here on that side, which we could say could be sky or whatever leaves, or both. No. So this should be a cooler, bluer, until what happens, right? The one overtakes the other. And this kind of stuff comes into play here too, right? More specifically where the secondary colors come in and start things. Reflected color on the pine trees, probably not a ton that's going to show up right away. I'll leave them for now. Certainly ambient light and reflected color here, so that those rocks are going to be a bluer, cooler gray in shadow where the sun isn't hitting. So gray, warmish gray rocks in shadow. I'm not happy with the light side of that, but I would think I'd be happier with that. So we'll say roughly shadow side. And then we'll get into timber. left this undone for a number of reasons, but let's now try to get that in there. I'd like to at least leave this so it feels like, okay, the general simple relationships are there, and this doesn't just feel like snake oil commentary without a presentation. And right as you say I'm only using this, I'm gonna change brushes.
Sorry, I jinxed it.
No, it was time. Local color, tonal color, reflected color, in turn conditioned by the color of the light, the intensity of the light, the intervening atmosphere. Right, so I've kind of fiddled around and talked a bit about the first three, but not the final conditioners and also additional players. So here's when this baby better come together here. What I want to say is I've got a golden, close to setting sun, and I've got its position sort of declared, right, and how the tonal color is resulting. But it doesn't feel like there's a warm light on that tree and a golden sun. So let me see what I can swing. And also keep it in mind, rehashing, right, the surfaces more perpendicular should be more gold than the ones less perpendicular that'll want to feature more of the gray-green local color. So sink or swim time.
Can you explain that last part? That was good.
Which-
I didn't get it.
Just rewind.
And I wanna get it.
It's recorded.
Sneaky.
You know, if I ever do say things that are good, I can't remember what. I'll try. Hopefully I'll rehash it.
Oh, it wasn't that good.
I wiped my tear, but I got paint all over mine. All right, here we go. Drum roll, please, as Leon Parks would say, magic paintbrush. Gold light. Setting sun. In light. And then not only the color of the light, but how intense it is. So how intense is what I'm trying to figure out. And I think I want it a little more intense. Doesn't quite have that golden glow feel yet.
And the branches, because they're not perpendicular, will be a little less than.
For those that are in light even, yeah, and I haven't decided to give myself the luxury of where's the light yet, but. Have I got a highlight on here yet? No. Let's say that picks up a little light. We'll say that. It's a little light. I like what you say. Less perpendicular, so not as bright. More perpendicular, brighter. Here, we'll say just a little bit of the underside. Pictures that. What happens to the gray-green pine trees when a warm light hits them? They could even become orange. No way. They're green, they can't be orange. Well, let's see what we can sell there. Too dark. Green. I'm missing my yellow green. So I'm trying to say, well, I want to feel like the same light that's on the aspen to be hitting the pines. And it's not just color, right? It's surface, right? An aspen tree will reflect color differently, certainly, than a pine boughs will, but there'll also be some of that same expression. Tone that down a bit. Way too intense. that yellow was taking over too much. Yeah, it's looking kind of weird and funky, and it still needs some refinement, but part of it's because the grass isn't featuring the old light yet. So I'm gonna start getting that in there. And then as the light gets the warmest though, is it the most intense, right before it sets? That's a tough question sometimes. Did it increase in saturation, or as it got weaker, as it got lower? So I'm gonna see if I can. Will fall off when it comes to the sun. Easy to see. Impossible. Okay, what's wrong with this grass? It's getting yellower, but it's also farther back in space, so it needs to get a little lighter, bluer, therefore cooler. So we're trying to capture all that now. What about pine trees and light, farther back in space? Trying to figure out what that would be. So warm light, but atmosphere cooling it. Since we want to say trees back in there. Jim Wilcox, it would be purple, I think. Apply some, trying to say forest, trees in light, but further back in space. Maybe some of that even in shadow. You guys like, we're saying goodbye to that red, and it's a sad day. Yeah.
What are you gonna do with that big black spot at the top?
This?
Yeah.
Nothing. All right, let's get those rocks in light a little bit.
I like the pine trees when they come up there.
How do you keep your edge control back when you're doing the front porch, right before you do the background?
I was afraid somebody was gonna question real painting technique here. That's just a color commentary. Just pick it up right there. Yeah, I'm not, this is not amenable to edges, that's for sure. It's just thick and quick and.
Make gas spoons have little round things all around.
Yeah, we've got to get some of those on there too. We've got to get some highlights. And still not convinced. You guys haven't sold me on this in shadow grass thing yet either. It gets lighter and cooler. grass and shadow a little bit. I'm feeling about time. Let's place the shadow side of that. Get those trees in shadow. And haven't figured that yet. So forth. Excuse me. So I've still got some color problems. I've got a number of color problems. Let me hit a little bit, clean up the sky color. Let's see if we can make that feel like a believable sky with a warm light traveling through it. Just having a bit of a tough time keeping this palette, keep it clean. Anything a little stale blue hopefully can save. Eight 30, time?
The train has arrived. Yes.
Okay, sorry. Trying to get a highlight on that tree. Should be quite yellow, because it's a yellow, orange, or gold, because it's the color of the light reflecting. Call it a piece. Come on, Bryan. Highlight. So on and so forth. I really wanted to just put a few black standards on there for the knots as an assistant. Good aspens in there. Knot holes. Some of that more believable.
I really never thought the aspirin could do that dark and look so good.
Well, Charlotte, let's use that as the parting, let's use that as the parting thought. It does need to be lighter. So let's finish it with just really some beautiful sky color coming through. Pretty, it's just all a little too gray and dark. That's better. That. Clean it up a little bit more. That light. Stop trying to see dark enough to be in shadow, but receiving some of that light. You see a lot of people play with that, don't you? When you see aspens, they really play that reflected intensity business on it. Maybe some of it that's stable green. Helps describe that better. It's too dark. So the story goes. Have any white? Any snow?
The round thingies are supposed to go all around the tree.
These here? Somebody challenge me. It's a little grayish, but you get the, you know, right, you get the gist of the deal. The adjustments. If I were, you know, and I appreciate the time, I won't take any more of it. I've abused your good graces as it is, but, you know, a little bit cleaner color now. I'll clean off the palette, I think, and then give it another pass of. Just not real happy with that. Seems like it needs to be a little bit lighter, a little bit cooler. Just not getting enough of that sky color in there too.
That last one is really not white.
Not light, you say?
Yeah, so cool.
Okay, quiz times. What are the 6 categories? I saw a few people taking notes. Local color is the general color under the white condition. Tonal color says it's what happens to local color with the effects of light and shadow. And reflected color. Local color, tonal color, reflected color, in turn conditioned by
Color of light.
the light,
Intensity of light.
intensity of the light, and the last one, intervening atmosphere. Thank you, and that could be like water or any again, translucent material that is being seen through, and so whatever that color business is there, it's just not gonna be clean enough. Most got it there. So the catchphrase is, if you know what to expect to see, you're more likely to see it. And if you know the truth of what you are seeing, you're more empowered to affect it, augment it, deal with it as you. And if you're just totally lost, right, you're painting something, it's like, man, I'm just not capturing it. Analyze with those categories. What's that?
Need some round thingies on the left-hand side of the tree.
I think you're a little obsessed with round thingies on that tree.
I know, because I used to cut them down for
I was
firewood.
gonna say, you probably own a cabin, you've spent hours looking at them, and you've got the, how does that look from far away? I don't even know what the heck it is. better from back here.
Let's do it.
Maybe.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time. Thank you,